Have you ever paused to question why others interact with you in precisely the way they do? Why some cut you off mid-sentence behaving as if your perspective carries no weight or relevance? Why in group settings they overlook your presence, glancing past you as though you were transparent, and recall everyone's contributions, but somehow forget yours? Have you noticed yourself being talked over or forgotten even when you've contributed comment 1? If you've felt invisible in a group. Comment 2. If you've caught yourself shrinking your voice to avoid conflict. If you feel these psychology sharings are helpful and relatable, you're welcome to become a channel member and stay with us on a deeper journey. As a member, you'll get early and extended access to more in-depth practical content that you can apply in everyday life. Why do they belittle your sensitivity, minimize your pain, and dismiss your personal choices? Or, in a more damaging pattern, exploit your generosity, exhaust your resources and energy, and then vanish as if you were nothing more than an instrument for their convenience? Perhaps you have become the ever-available person, the one who agrees to every request, even when depleted. You remain quiet to sidestep confrontation, choosing peace at any price. You forgive at once, often prematurely, even in the absence of acknowledgement or a sincere apology. And what in practice comes back to you? Contempt thinly veiled as impatience, indifference, masquerading as neutrality, and silence that speaks louder than words. Do you know what is most difficult in all of this? Deep inside, you sense the ongoing lack of respect. Yet the method for interrupting this cycle remains unclear, leaving you caught between awareness and inaction. So you continue to acquiesce. You persist in being understanding, courteous, and useful, sustained by the hope that eventually others will acknowledge your value. But that anticipated day seems perpetually deferred. It never actually arrives. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Perhaps this is precisely why the pattern remains intact. Genuine self-respect demands something unsettling: the courage to look inward and concede your share of responsibility. As long as you disregard your own needs and limits, others will take their cue and disregard them as well. This discussion will not supply quick lines to rehearse, nor will it frame you as a passive victim. Instead, it aims to reveal the underlying cause, one that is far nearer and more intimate than you might initially assume. If you are weary of being disrespected by friends, relatives, partners, or colleagues, the moment has come to grasp why this pattern emerges. It is also time to assume responsibility for the direction of your emotional life and the boundaries that shape it. Here, we will turn to Jungian depth psychology to clarify why you endure what should be unacceptable and how to transform that tendency decisively and for good. Because as long as you continue to betray your own standards and limits, it is unrealistic to expect others to consistently treat you with dignity. Are you prepared to finally articulate to yourself, underscoring the moment, what you have never quite had the courage to say aloud? The external world is not as random as it appears. In many ways, it functions as a stark mirror of your inner life, reflecting beliefs and patterns you may prefer to avoid. Confronting this correspondence requires a level of honesty that few are willing to practice. You might conclude that others disrespect you because they are unkind, self-absorbed, or emotionally cold. Perhaps that is occasionally true. Yet a harder truth is that people often respond to the stance you take, or more precisely, the stance you fail to take about your own value. When you stay silent in the presence of unfairness, or accept treatment that places you beneath others, You communicate a powerful message. This is how I regard myself. This is the standard I permit for how I am treated. Carl Jung held that outer reality often mirrors the contents of the unconscious. The slights you draw in the exclusions and the wounding silences can symbolically express your relationship to the disowned or repressed aspects within. If you fail to recognize your intrinsic worth, you broadcast an image that is fragile and uncertain. That projection is what others encounter, and they respond accordingly, treating you in line with the insecure persona you present. The aim here is not to assign blame, but to awaken awareness. The persistent disrespect you experience may originate in the quiet, unexamined agreements you have made with yourself over the years about what you will accept. Perhaps early lessons taught you that being good meant keeping quiet, that belonging demanded continual concession, and that love was effectively synonymous with compliance and submission. As an adult, these mental scripts still operate in the background, shaping your decisions, your relationships, and every moment you swallow your words instead of asserting them. You have absorbed the belief that your value hinges on external approval. That quiet conviction permeates your interactions, coloring how you think, feel, and respond. You present yourself as lesser, not through malice toward yourself, but through habit, a deeply ingrained and largely unconscious routine of self-minimization. Unless you bring this pattern into conscious awareness, the cycle continues. You may relocate, switch careers, or end relationships, yet the same dynamic will reappear because its origin is internal rather than external. Jung observed that what remains unconscious shows up as fate. Therefore, until you confront the lens through which you see yourself, you will repeatedly encounter situations that confirm your perceived invisibility. You do not consistently draw in what you desire. Instead, you attract outcomes aligned with what you secretly believe you deserve, even when that belief resides beneath conscious awareness. Yet there is a path forward. It begins at the most uncomfortable place, ceasing to chase respect from the outside and committing to cultivate it from within through choices and boundaries that honor your value. This brings us to a seldom asked but decisive question, one that shapes the trajectory of your emotional life. Why are you still attempting to prove your worth to others? That is the central theme we will explore in the next section. You have spent much of your life attempting to demonstrate that you are enough, striving to be the perfect child, the exemplary partner, the friend who never disappoints. You keep bending, adjusting, and reshaping yourself to match what others expect, continually tailoring your behavior to maintain acceptance. And what has that effort actually returned to you? At best, brief flashes of approval, temporary nods of satisfaction, but rarely, if ever, authentic and enduring respect. The reason is simple: people who organize their lives around pleasing others are sooner or later perceived as easy to influence, someone whose boundaries can be pushed and whose needs can be sidelined. That is the trap of external validation, one of the most subtle yet damaging dynamics in our psychology, because it operates quietly, rewarding compliance while eroding your sense of self. Carl Jung taught that the persona, the social self, the mask we wear to gain acceptance, is useful and even necessary, but it carries risks when it overshadows what is genuine within us. If you identify too strongly with that mask, you slowly lose contact with your true identity, confusing performance with essence and approval with worth. When this takes hold, you become disconnected from your core. Your values, needs, and authentic preferences are muffled or ignored. You gradually turn into a polite ghost, visible, agreeable, and convenient for everyone, yet not truly respected or deeply recognized for who you are. The wish to be accepted is legitimate and universal. It belongs to human nature and serves real social purposes. The problem begins when that desire stops being a guide among others and becomes the primary compass of your identity, dictating choices that should come from your inner standards. When your self-worth is pegged to others' reactions, a single compliment inflates you, while one critical remark punctures your confidence, leaving you emotionally dependent. In that state, your self-esteem is effectively taken hostage by the gaze of others rising and falling, according to external signals you cannot control. You work tirelessly to be useful, necessary, even indispensable, because deep down you believe respect must be earned through flawlessness, through never making mistakes, and never inconveniencing anyone. Yet a blunt truth emerges: the more you attempt to prove your worth, the more you silently broadcast that you doubt it yourself, reinforcing the very insecurity you hope to erase. People who truly respect themselves do not chase attention or plead to be noticed. They do not treat validation as a scarce resource to be hunted. They help others without converting kindness into a transaction, refusing to barter favors for affection or approval. They have a grounded sense of identity, and that clarity is sufficient. It anchors their behavior without constant external reassurance. They do not need to self-sacrifice to gain visibility, nor must they erase their preferences to be liked. They remain present without self-erasure. They are not paralyzed by the fear of displeasing others, recognizing that occasional disapproval is the natural cost of living in alignment with their principles. To arrive at this posture, you must challenge a deeply embedded belief that respect from others is something you must continually earn or purchase through compliance. In reality, you do not need to do that. Respect does not require perpetual self-negation or proof. What is truly necessary is to rebuild the respect you may have lost for yourself, perhaps long ago, perhaps gradually over time, so that it becomes a stable inner reference. Only when self-respect is restored does the gaze of others stop feeling like a threat, and instead become merely a reflection data you can consider without being ruled by it. However, this shift depends on a deliberate decision, one only you can make. Are you ready to make one clear, self-respecting choice this week? Comment 1. If you already know where you'll say a calm, firm no. Comment 2. If you're still deciding which boundary to set first. That decision almost always starts with an act that appears simple, yet feels terrifying if you are caught in the approval cycle, saying no, clearly, calmly, and without apology. In the following step, we will address this pivotal moment when you begin establishing boundaries, and perhaps for the first time, place yourself at the center of your own life. Because respect takes root precisely at that point. That is when you discover that no can be one of the most powerful gestures of self-love, a sentence that protects your time, energy, and dignity. If this message resonates with you and feels meaningful, consider clicking the subscribe button to continue receiving guidance that supports your growth and self-respect. And subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You have long been conditioned to equate being a good person with never contradicting anyone, to confuse love with self-sacrifice, and to imagine that people who set boundaries are inherently selfish, cold, or insensitive. Because of those beliefs, whenever something unsettles you, you swallow it. Whenever someone oversteps your limits, you keep quiet. Whenever you are wounded, you forgive, often immediately, even before the other person recognizes or admits the harm they caused. You tell yourself this is maturity, balance, and compassion. In truth, you are erasing yourself. Bit by bit, day after day, you become less present to your own needs, gradually fading from your own life. The core problem is simple. The world rarely respects people who fail to model self-respect in their own choices and boundaries. And respect is not something you request, plead for, or endlessly negotiate. Respect is established, imposed through consistent limits and self-possession. This form of imposition need not be violent, aggressive, or retaliatory. It must be firm, unambiguous, and non-negotiable, steady enough that others learn where the lines actually are. And it begins with a single word you may still fear using: no. Saying no is the first tangible, observable act of self-respect. In that moment, you communicate to others and to yourself that there are limits that will not be crossed, that your energy is not up for barter, that your time has value, and that your well-being is a priority. To reach this point, you must loosen guilt's grip, because guilt will arise often strongly as you change patterns. When you say no to someone accustomed to your compliance, guilt will gnaw at you. It will sow doubt about your choice, an attempt to pull you back to the old position where you always yielded. Carl Jung reminds us that individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, necessarily involves confrontation. One of the earliest confrontations is with the version of you that learned survival through constant acquiescence, by saying yes to almost everything. It is the part that believes pleasing others is the sole route to acceptance and belonging. Yet that kind of acceptance extracts a steep price: your sense of personal value, your dignity, and ultimately your identity. Do you truly want respect? Then begin by saying no in the very places where you used to say sure out of habit. Start declining tasks that leave you breathless and overextended. Create distance from relationships that siphon your energy. Let go of invitations you accept only from obligation. And notice what happens. Those who benefited most from your lack of limits will be the first to react, because your new boundary exposes their pattern of misuse, and that exposure stings them and challenges you. Still, this discomfort is necessary, growing pains that accompany reclaiming agency. Understand that each time you say no to the world, you are simultaneously saying yes to yourself, affirming your needs and values. And that internal yes initiates something powerful: the rebirth of your authority and the recovery of your authentic voice. It marks the start of a new way of living, one that no longer hinges on permission from others to validate your choices. Yet an even deeper force may still block you from setting limits. It hides in regions of your psyche you avoid examining. It resides in your shadow, the traits you have repressed, denied, or tried to bury, yet which continue to influence your life quietly from underneath. In the next part, we will go further, exploring how the shadow sustains submission, and why, until you integrate what is hidden, you will keep accepting what should be unacceptable. Why do you tolerate what clearly harms you? Why remain in friendships that shrink you, relationships that exhaust you, or settings where acceptance requires hiding your true self? Why do you permit being interrupted, ignored, overburdened, or wronged without any response? The explanation does not rest solely in your upbringing, traumas, or circumstances. The answer is also in your shadow. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the collection of emotions, impulses, traits, and desires you have pushed down because you were taught they were wrong, ugly, or unacceptable. The child punished for saying no learned submission as a survival skill. The one disciplined for showing anger learned to smile outwardly while swallowing tears and resentment. The child ignored when seeking attention learned to turn invisible, minimizing themselves to avoid disturbing others. Over time, you constructed a pleasant, polite, accommodating persona while burying your vitality, your healthy assertiveness, and righteous indignation. But what is buried does not vanish. Paradoxically, it gathers force in the underground of the psyche. Your quiet shadow remains active. It is the part that undermines you precisely when you need to assert yourself. It whispers better not each time you attempt to take a stand. It is also what freezes you at the very moment you feel ready to say enough. Consider this. How many times did you want to speak up, but chose silence instead? How often did you swallow your pride to preserve a peace that in truth never belonged to you? How many times did you allow someone to cross your boundaries and then felt used, tarnished, or small afterward? You endure the intolerable because you are disconnected from what you have lost in yourself and afraid to access parts you were taught to dislike or fear, namely, your firmness, your anger, and your instinct to protect yourself. You still believe love requires passivity and that sustaining relationships requires erasing your own presence. But that belief is false, just old conditioning, running like outdated software in the background of your mind. Until you confront it, you will relive the same story in new settings, new friends, with the same undertone of contempt, new jobs, with the same sense of exploitation, new relationships with the same wound of invisibility. Consider a practical example. You did a major favor for someone hoping quietly for recognition, but all you received was thin gratitude, or worse, fresh demands. You kept silent stewing, inside feeling used and resentful. When disrespect happens, do you speak up or stay silent? Comment 1 if you've addressed a slight directly and felt relief. Comment 2 if you stayed quiet and later wished you hadn't. Or recall when someone disrespected you publicly, a boss friend or partner, and you swallowed hard, convincing yourself it wasn't worth the confrontation. That kind of silence is not wisdom. It is submission dressed up as maturity, and it springs directly from the shadow. Jung said that what you do not accept in yourself controls you. Repressed anger becomes passivity. Buried firmness mutates into fear. An ignored voice transforms into anxiety. In this way, you become imprisoned by your own denial. And as long as you continue to flee these disowned parts, you will live at others' mercy, hoping someone will someday treat you in the way you have not permitted yourself to be treated. There is, however, a way out, and it requires courage, integrating the shadow, and reclaiming what you learned to repress, not to become cruel or indifferent, but to become whole at last. That is precisely what we will examine next. Before you can demand respect, you must recover something even more vital, your inner power, and it lies in the very place you least wish to look. Respect is not primarily demanded from others. It is built from within, day by day, through concrete, repeatable actions. If you want to stop being treated as disposable, you must act like someone who has intrinsic value and do so consistently. This change is not magical. It comes through practice, constant, conscious, and intentional. Here are 5 practical tools you can begin using today to rebuild respect for yourself first, and consequently, from others. First, use discomfort as a compass. Whenever something bothers you, pause. Do not over-rationalize. Avoid making excuses for the other person's conduct. Ask yourself, if I deeply respected myself, what would I do now? The answer might be to leave the conversation, set a clear boundary, refrain from replying to a message, or decline an invitation. Follow that guidance. Discomfort is your system signaling that you are on the verge of betraying yourself again. Second stop, justifying everything. You do not need to provide 3 paragraphs of explanation for every no you offer. Excessive justification telegraphs guilt and insecurity about your decision, weakening the boundary you just set. Respect starts with firmness. Learn to say, I can't. It won't work today. I don't feel comfortable with that. And then consider the matter settled. People who insist on over-explanations are often those accustomed to overstepping your limits. Third, prioritize yourself explicitly in your schedule. Review your week. Where do you place yourself amid your obligations? How many hours are truly dedicated to you? If the answer is none, that is a clear indicator of internalized disrespect. Reserve time non-negotiable for activities that nourish mind, body, and spirit. Treat this not as a luxury, but as an essential obligation. Make yourself a priority, even if it begins with just 1 hour a day. This single shift changes everything. Fourth, replace raw reactivity with a deliberate pause. When someone disrespects you, you may feel pulled either to explode or to go silent. Neither extreme is healthy or effective. What works best is to pause, breathe, and then state your position clearly. Say, I do not accept this kind of talk. This is not okay for me. Do not apologize for feeling bothered or set about explaining it away. Simply communicate clearly and calmly. When you assert yourself with respect and steadiness, you establish the standard of interaction and quietly teach others to meet that same level. 5. Choose to surround yourself with people who actively uplift you. Take a close look at your environment. Does it recognize your value, or does it steadily consume your time and energy? Are you among people who truly see who you are, or among those who appear only when they need a favor? The respect you seek begins with the spaces you choose to occupy. Learn to step back quietly without drama or explanation. Those who genuinely want you near will notice your absence. Those who do not notice likely never truly saw you in the first place. These practices are not inherently complex. What makes them feel difficult is the emotional pattern built over years, pleasing to gain acceptance, yielding to be loved, and staying silent to preserve a fragile and one-sided peace. Breaking the pattern requires repetition, steady firmness, and patient follow-through. Yet the more consistently you honor yourself in small, everyday choices, the harder it becomes for others to disrespect you in larger, consequential matters. There is, however, a crucial point to face. Even as you begin to practice self-respect, a powerful force can pull you back into old habits, the fear of being alone. Emotional dependency is the final shackle that keeps you from living authentically. We will explore this next, because genuine respect arises only when you no longer rely on anyone else's gaze to determine your worth. A time arrives when you must stop blaming others, stop waiting for them to transform, to acknowledge you, or to offer the respect you have not yet granted to yourself. The world is not blind. It is watching how you position yourself and simply responding to that posture. Your stance invites a corresponding reaction. You want to be heard, yet you keep silencing your voice. You want to be valued, yet you accept crumbs. You want to be prioritized, yet you place yourself last. Then, you wonder why your presence goes unnoticed. The answer is stark, but necessary: you are hiding. And that self-concealment makes you hard to see. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The disrespect you encounter, the painful relationships, And the repeating cycles are not mere bad luck. They mirror the quality of your relationship with yourself. External conditions change only when the internal structure, your beliefs, limits, and habits reorganizes. You do not need to become impenetrable cold or indifferent to earn respect. What you need is to stop begging for love through obedience and to stop reshaping yourself to fit environments that suffocate your authenticity. Above all, make peace with the possibility of being alone. Only those who feel internally whole can tolerate their own company, and only then can they freely choose whom they truly want beside them. Anything less is dependence dressed up as affection. From this point forward, whenever someone crosses your boundary, you face two choices: remain silent and reinforce the old pattern, or take a stand and begin rewriting your story. You do not need aggression to do this. You only need to be truthful with yourself and consistent in your stance. When self-respect takes root, your energy shifts, your posture steadies, and even your gaze changes, and the world notices that transformation. Respect begins within. Once it is established, there you no longer have to ask for it. It becomes the natural and inevitable outcome. What's one inner standard you'll honor today? So respect flows from within. Comment 1. If you're committing to a single, non-negotiable boundary. Comment 2. If you want to start smaller, with one everyday micro-boundary. When respect begins within, it stops being a feeling and becomes a structure that organizes your psyche. At this threshold, individuation shifts from theory to daily practice. The shadow is no longer an enemy to suppress, but a reservoir to draw from. Anger refines into discernment. Firmness becomes clean and proportionate. And sensitivity, once mocked, matures into precise perception. As Jung put it, we do not awaken by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. To sustain this, lean on ritual, not willpower. Willpower fatigues. Ritual repatterns. Take 5 minutes each day to name one feeling, one need, and one boundary for the next 24 hours. Each week, review. Where did I betray myself? Where did I stand firm? Individuation advances less by grand gestures than by faithful repetition. Engage active imagination. Write to the inner figures that derail you: the pleaser, the vigilant critic, the abandoned child. Ask what they fear will happen if you say no. Then reassure them with consistent action, clear limits, calm refusals, measured follow-through. Your inner parliament grows orderly as each part is heard and integrated. Balance, anima, animus, as a living rhythm. If you skew tender borrow backbone state, the request, the limit, and the consequence in one breath. If you skew decisive borrow receptivity, listen until you truly understand, then decide without apology. Boundaries infused with empathy are breathable. Empathy framed by boundaries is trustworthy. Let dreams participate. They are nightly dispatches from the unconscious, locked rooms, opening a voice, finally audible, a familiar house brightening. Treat such images as guidance, not ornament. Saying no does not end love. It begins clean love. You are not withdrawing from life, only from self-neglect. The self accepted completely does not grow hard, it grows coherent. And coherence reads to others as dignity. From there, respect is no longer requested. It is reflected. If you'd love to keep receiving more meaningful videos about psychology healing and understanding yourself better, consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. Your registration not only unlocks more valuable content for you, but also gives me the motivation to keep creating and sharing regularly.